You have one movie to watch for the rest of your life. What is that one movie?
If I have to pick one, I think it's going to be Lord of the Rings for sure.
Whoa, okay, hold on. Are you going with the trilogy here? Are you flexing the rules of this
You
question?
know what? You know what? A lot of people will say that the second one is the best, or the third one. For me, it's always going to be number one. Lord of the Rings, the first one when it came out, man, I
Yeah,
lost my mind when I saw that. For me, it's always going to be Lord of the Rings for sure.
done,
Number
done.
one, number one. That's it.
Amazing. Welcome, everyone. For those of you tuning in live, thank you so much. And for those of you watching after the fact, thank you as well. This is Henry's Live, where we sit down with a new creator every single weekday, Monday to Friday, and we talk about their craft, their tips and tricks, as well as the gear that they use. And this episode's really special. I'm joined by my friend Vinay. He is a fine art wedding photographer, portrait photographer that also dabbles in street and travel photography. And every single time I talk to him, it ends up being a half an hour discussion. So why not do it in front of the camera? Vinay, how are you doing today?
Guys, man, it's so nice to be here with you, man. I mean, we've talked about this for so many times, and every time I see you in the store and everything, and you're right, it just ends up turning into some kind of crazy podcast. And we joke about that all the time, man. We should just lab each other up just before we walk into a store and just have a conversation with each other. But I'm super excited to be here, man. I can't wait to do this with you. This is sick.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And listen, you produce amazing work. I've told you this before. Tell the people, what is it that you specialize in and what really, scratches your creative itch?
Absolutely, man. So I'm in the wedding industry for like, I don't even know, 10 to 15 years at this point. But aside from being a fine art wedding photographer, portrait photography, travel, street, I love doing the abstract stuff as well. And if you notice, like with my style of work, a lot of it usually just has to do with playing around with the night element and keeping things a little bit more on the darker, moodier side. But trying to bring that into the wedding elements and the portrait side of things, that's kind of really what I look for in photography as well. And it's just something that gets me really excited. But yeah.
And right now, the people, they should be able to see your images. I'm on your Instagram page right now. I'm just going through your
Cool.
images here. And one of the things that stands out about your work is that you've defined your clear style here. You have this aesthetic, you sort of developed it, and you have a ton of images that showcase that. So I have to ask you, how long did it take for you to find your visual style, your visual signature, and what did you do to help you get there?
I think that really starts with like me going back a few years, maybe like over 10 or 15 years, when it all started with like I like to work more at night. I just choose to work better at night, and that's just how I function. And so when I started to get into photography, I noticed a lot of photographs that were inspired, like that inspired me. Were all done in a moodier, low key, sort of darker environment, and the challenge of learning how to do that properly was, I think, what interested me more about photography than anything else.
Right.
I always say this thing, like, it's like if we go outside with this sort of lighting condition and I give you a camera, the chances of you getting a well exposed picture, not a good picture necessarily, but a well exposed picture, is you have a really high chance. But where if we do that at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and then you start to think a little bit, and all of a sudden that challenges your creative, capabilities a little bit. And I think that's really what got me into that style, that aesthetic of making things look a little bit more moodier and darker and things.
Amazing, amazing. And as you sort of got there, how did you know you were on the right track? Because this is one of the things is that people will often pick up their camera as they get started. It starts off as a hobby, and eventually it can become this thriving business, this little empire they build for themselves. But
Yeah,
it is a
absolutely.
process, and it does take time. So how did you know you were on the right track as you were sort of going down that journey?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right with that, man. It is a process and something that, I mean, even now, like, I mean, we're learning as we speak. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I might do something, today, and then a week from now, it might be something completely different. And that's the ongoing process of this: is that learning, taking down your notes, relearning, trying those experiments over and over again. But I mean, it was just like the more I started doing it, the more people started to notice the type of work. And I know there's other people who, like, will comment and be like, do you even know how to shoot in the afternoon, or can you even shoot in the sun, or do you know how to shoot during daylight hours? And we do have a different department for that. It's called midday media, and and a lot of people ask about that. Oh, we want this like more open air, pastel type of look, and it's
Yeah, yeah,
definitely
yeah.
possible for sure.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's a process that I've developed over time. Where I just like it, and the more I started to do it, people started to notice it, and just like how you're saying now, people are noticing that style of work a little bit more, and that's
Yeah.
really cool that people can see it. So
Was that the key to sort of you differentiating your work? Was that sort of how you decided that, okay, this is how I'm going to stand out in the market by having my own visual style?
Absolutely, yeah. I think I think not that there's anything wrong with it, man. I absolutely love what everyone else is doing in the industry as well, and I think there's some great photographers out here. I just feel like, I felt like when I wanted to start off into this, that I didn't want to kind of do what everybody else is doing. I wanted to do, stand out a little bit, and I thought I would just introduce the night element, and that's why everything associated with the brand is all with the owl, midnight, working at night, everything's dark. And I just kind of ran with that wave for a little bit and just see where it would end up, and that's about it. But that's one of the things that I did want to start off with, is just how do I make myself look different and just staying true to the brand. That's it.
Right. And what's sort of the feedback been as you've sort of done it this way and given people really a unique product, right? Something that you don't usually associate with wedding photography, but clearly works, and it is stand out a bit. What's your feedback like from your customers?
To be honest with you, a lot of people, like I say, do approach it and say, like, can we see some of your brighter work, or like, is there, like, does all your work look like moody and dark and very contrasty, and that's why we make that joke about the midday media as well. But at the end of the day, I think people do like a good balance of both. Like, I mean, after sitting down with a consultation, going through a portfolio, I think what ends up happening is the couple usually ends up going with a good balance of both, like really bright, airy stuff and also very dark and dramatic, low key stuff as well. So, I know it's a little bit of a niche thing for you to go with the moodier market, or the moodier sort of tones and stuff, but I think it's kind of getting around, and people have started to notice it a little bit more. So
yeah. Nice. Now, I got to talk about sort of your eye. When you go in as a wedding photographer and you sort of see whether it's the bride's house, the groom's house, or even the venue, where are your eyes going? What are you looking for? Because this is the thing, is that, people go in with a shot list now. There's tons of tutorials online, and some people are often learning from the same other pros in the market. Where do your eyes go, and how do you look to sort of compose your work?
That's a really good question, man. I mean, when I first started off as a wedding photographer, that's something that I used to do as well. Have a shot list, and there's nothing wrong with that, man. It kind of helps you, kind of guide that path throughout the day. But over time, what I've done now is that I go into a venue, or like, a bride prep or a groom prep or whatever, and I don't even take out a camera, man. I kind of just walk around the house or the hotel room. I walk around the venues, and I kind of just observe what's happening and what everyone's up to. And if there's something being set up over here, I kind of take note of that there might be something important going on here. And, I'll come back to that later when things are set up. Right. Some of the things that I do, even before I honestly reach for a camera, is I put some headphones on, and I kind of just listen to some music, and I kind of set the vibe for the rest of my day. And I there's so many times where I've walked into a bride prep and I have headphones on, and I'm listening to like one of my favorite tracks, just to kind of set like my mood right. And then once I feel like, okay, I've got my vibe right, my mood right, then I'll start reaching for a camera. And I don't even at that point like spray away kind of thing. I really slow it down, like I'm shooting on film almost, and really kind of take a look at what's going on and who's important and what's not, and build the rest of the day that way as well. Even from the bride prep to the ceremony to the venue to the reception, I'm always kind of like, who's important, what's going on, why is that there, and just kind of really taking it slow, and that's really don't rush into it. Just take it one step at a time. That's it.
And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. It's almost like you're taking the questions out of my mouth here. But we talked about this before, where that spray and pray approach is something you do not entertain. And it's really about being methodical in how you capture. And this is a bit of a rhetorical question, but why do you choose to go about it that way?
I mean, at the end of the day, when you're shooting a wedding, right, like you're going to come home with like sometimes up to 5,000 pictures, and you're going to go through them, and you're going to realize that a lot of those pictures are like, this frame is very similar to the first frame and the frame before that. And like, at the end of the day, when you call your images and you go through your delivery process, you want to give your clients the best work possible. You want to give them the work at the end of the day that just, captures that story like nothing else, and for that reason, I think it was really important for me to like slow down, and we get excited with all the gear and all the lighting and everything in our bags all the time, but like to slow it down and to really understand what the story is all about. With wedding photography specifically, like, let's be honest, we don't really have much time throughout the day to be creative, like as creative as we would like to be, because at the end of the day, we are capturing an event for somebody, so, like, where pictures are going to be looked back on for the rest of their life. And it's our job to kind of tell that story a little bit of, like in a more creative way. And so that's where I felt like, okay, let's just slow this down. Let's not spray and pray. Let's see if we can actually capture a story here that they weren't able to see on the day of with all the chaos and running around. And that's kind of what I really try to focus on.
And I have to ask you, when you're kind of going through this process, like there is a strict schedule, right? Like it does not go to your schedule as the creator, right? You have to
No.
kind of adhere
Yeah,
to that. So as you sort of
absolutely.
go through the day, as you sort of go through the motions, how do you find time to be creative? Because like you said, you don't really get much of that opportunity, but you kind of have to force it in a certain way, right? Where it's not like a directed shoot where you're kind of painting it together and composing. You have to
Yeah.
force creativity. So how do you sort of maintain that as well as pay attention to what's happening in front of you?
Yeah, so I think it also again starts off with what I was saying before is it's just kind of like scoping out the scene a little bit, right? Like, I mean, something that we do when we do our creative shoots and where we have creative control over everything, we do oftentimes a location scale, right? So like if I'm doing like a portrait location at a site that I've never been to, me personally, I usually go and I drive down and I scope it out. I just, get a coffee and I walk around and I see what's going on. I usually have like a camera with me and then I kind of look at my angles and then I take that approach and I bring it into like a bride prep and again I slow down. I kind of look at those, all the areas that I scoped out already, and I was like, okay, this angle would be really cool. The light hitting this would be really cool. Whereas like, and then seeing how things, if the makeup artist or something like that is doing something creative and there's some reflections there or some mirrors there, and try to see if how we can use some of these other elements into our photography and be creative with that. And at the end of the day, like I said, you are capturing an event for somebody, and wherever you have those couple of minutes to try to be like, oh, you know what, I want to try something. I'm going to advise you to just do it, because you may not get that second chance throughout the day. Just do it. If you see a creative element there that you want to try to use, pick it up, use it. And you know what? If you make a mistake, who cares? Make a mistake proudly, learn from it, and be
Yeah.
like, that worked, that didn't work, and move on with the rest of the day. That's it.
Now, this wouldn't be a Henry's live conversation if I didn't ask you about gear. So, what is your go-to kit with respect to your wedding photography? Because listen, hey, I know you from beforehand. You have different kits that serve different purposes. With respect to your wedding
Absolutely.
work, what's your go-to
Yeah.
gear?
Yeah, man, that's a great question, man. I honestly, it feels like I changed my camera gears faster than I changed my shoes, man, at this point. But, yeah, I mean, I had them all, man, from Canon, Nikon, everything. For the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, I've been on the Fuji system, and I'm just absolutely in love with the Fuji system, man. I love them to death. I have every single one of their lenses. I don't even know how many bodies that I have at this point, but for the last 5 or 6 years, it's definitely been a Fuji system. I am tampering now with the Sony system. Recently picked up the A7 IIIs,
Yeah.
got a couple of those, and just messing around with that. But if I have to pick my go-to over and over and over again, it is going to be the Fuji setup for me, man.
What is about the Fuji system that you like, that you find that it's a reliable workhorse camera that can, produce the results you want
Yeah,
for your wedding work?
yeah. Oh man, it's everything, man. I have such a like connection with this camera, and I just feel like it also helped define my style as well in it. The camera itself really fits my personality, and it really compels me to go out and shoot. I mean, I have the XT3 here as well, and just like overall with the retro styling of the buttons, the aperture ring, it gives me a very old school feel. I love how it fits in my hand. Being weather sealed, the screen, the articulating screen, like the viewfinder. I can go on and on and on about the camera. I don't really have anything negative to say about the Fuji system and the XT3, but I love how it fits my lifestyle. It compels me to go out and shoot all the time. Whereas some of the other cameras that I've worked with, I was like, I'll wait for it, or I'll go out whatever tomorrow, whatever. But night or day, rain or shine, when I have the XT3 in my hand, I want to go out and do something with it. It just forces me to go out and create with it.
Yeah,
So
and I should say for the people who are watching, listen, if you're in the YouTube, there's a bunch of you watching. Feel free to drop your questions as well. But I'm going to geek out over the gear with you. What are the go-to
sure,
lenses then? Because listen, no secret here, I'm a
yeah,
Fuji user as well. There's a
I
bunch of
know,
lenses
I
and
know, yeah.
bodies here. What are your go-to lenses with respect to wedding?
Yeah.
If you could only pick two or three, what would they be?
Actually, that is my setup. Honestly, I have two bodies with me throughout the wedding day, and I have one camera set up with my 35 equivalent, and then my other camera set up with my 85 equivalent. So for all the Fuji guys out there, that's a 23, and that's going to be my 56. And so my 35, 85 lives on my cameras. I don't even take them off. They're there the entire day.
Yeah.
And that's how I shoot my weddings. In fact, that's how I shoot almost anything, to be honest with you. I recently picked up a Fuji 10 to 24 for my travel and my street stuff.
Right.
But when it comes to weddings, engagement shoots, 35, 85 all day, every day. My portrait setup is always going to be an 85. occasionally I will throw on the 35, which is the 50 equivalent. I use the 50 a lot for things like detail shots and just like some of the prep stuff and whatever the case is. But
Right.
throughout the day, 35, 85, that's my setup.
Listen, man, you are speaking my language. You have sworn off zoom lenses, and while some people might consider that crazy, I find that extremely liberating, where you actually get to master the focal length, where you understand the purpose of each product. Is that the reason why? Was that a conscious decision, or was it something else?
Yeah, man. You know what, man? Like, so the way that it all started off was I was shooting on a Nikon D3S, and my camera had dropped out of my hand, and it completely shattered my lens, and the sensor broke, and it wasn't in the budget at that time to fix the camera at all. So I ended up going with the XT2 at that point.
Yeah.
And when it came to buying a lens, that's where I really thought about it. I was like, okay, do I want to go with this 50 to 140, which is the 70 to 200 equivalent, or do I want to try this 85 and just totally change up the way that I work? And I'm so glad, man, honestly, that I went with the 85 that day, because it's changed the way that I shoot. With the zoom lenses, we could stand there, we could zoom in and out, and whatever the case is. But having the prime lenses really teaches you composition, man. It can really puts an emphasis on rule of thirds and composition and symmetry and all of the elements of design and art and all that great stuff. And it really slows you down. It really gets you to think a little bit more. Having a prime lens, honestly, bro, I think twice before I take my picture sometimes. It's like, okay, is this the composition that I want? Yeah. And that's how I try to shoot, is I try to get it right on camera. I don't really do a lot of post-processing on my work, especially when it comes to cropping and things. I get it on camera, and I think having a 35 and 85 really helps with that.
Amazing, amazing. Listen, I got a question about Sony, but I got a few more things I got to talk to you about the Fuji system. Sure. Is that one of the unique things about Fuji is that they offer their film simulations, and it's more than just a filter.
Absolutely.
It is how they sort of take the colors that are hitting the sensor, applying their algorithm to kind of replicate some of their previous film stocks. So I got to ask you, what are the film simulations that you like, and what do you like about them?
Absolutely, man. So, I mean, being a film shooter as well, it was so great to see, Fuji incorporate that into their bodies. If I have to pick my maybe like one or two favorites, the Acros, I mean, you and I both know the Acros is magic. Ooh. And then if I have to pick one on top of that, it's going to be the Classic Chrome for me, man. Going back and forth between the Classic Chrome and the Acros it's just a game changer for me. 90% of my time, I'll be honest with you, when I'm doing my travel or my street photography, it's on Acros, and I don't even touch it. And even JPEGs, man. Honestly, JPEGs right out of the camera on Acros, it's just beautiful, man. I love it. Yeah. Absolutely. What about you, man? What's your favorite simulation?
Oh, I love this. I love when you turn the tables on me, and I will happily indulge. I was an Acros guy from time. Yep. And I told you this before. I shoot everything in black and white because the raw file has all the information, and I like to just see the world in black and white. But on a recent trip to India, I shot in classic negative because India demands you shoot in color, just with the texture and the sun, and especially in certain cities. And classic negative, it is either tied or just slightly ahead of Acros, which might shock you, but it's like the superior film stock, and it just what it does with the shadows and the green tones. And if you kind of boost, you can actually go in and customize it to boost the blues a little bit.
Yeah.
Overall, you just have such a unique result. And I think you'll agree with this, the power to just have a great image out of camera.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
You focus on the lighting, you focus on the composition, you get the technical part right. The camera does what it's supposed to do, what you paid it to do, and you just have this beautiful image in the moment. Like, there's nothing that beats that feeling, right? But listen, you are not afraid to test your favorite gear, and that's one of the ways I put it, is like, you've been shooting Fuji, you have Fuji, but you are not afraid to go out and pick up another system and see
not at all,
does this excel or beat what you have. And right now you went out and got like a Sony solution. So you have a Sony A7 III, is it?
Yeah, the Sony A7 III, and again, just as soon as I picked up that body, we could have done the zoom territory all over again, but no, it didn't go that way. It was 35, 85 all over again. And that's honestly just
which 35 and 85, because that's a question I got here, is what was your lens setup? So which 35 and 85 do you have for your Sony system?
So on the Sony system, I have the 35, 85, 1.8 on both. They're both 1.8 setups, and they're sharp, man. They're so much fun to shoot with. And on the Fuji 35, the 35 is a 2, and the 85 is a 1.2. So that beautiful soft background. But that Sony 35, 85, a lot of people think that and this is another thing that I constantly say to everybody, is that you don't necessarily need to spend all this money on gear and get the best and the Zeiss and all that great
Yeah.
stuff. Work with what you have, and honestly, all of my work for the last maybe 6 months to a year has been shot on the Sony 3585 at 1.8, and I've gotten fantastic results with it, I feel. So
Yeah, I mean, technical ability and knowledge and understanding light and composition will always, in my eyes, will always trump the
Absolutely.
gear that you have in your pocket. I have a question here. Someone asked you, have you tried the X100 series? And they're thinking about adding it as a walk-around shooter. So you get, I mean, listen, you
Yeah.
also work,
Yeah.
part-time at the Henry stores when they were open, and
Yeah, yeah.
you play with a
Yeah.
ton of gear. Have you played with the X100
Yeah.
series?
Absolutely, man. The X100 series is actually one of my favorite cameras, and when the time comes, I'm definitely gonna have one of them in my bag for sure.
Yeah.
Along with the X-T3, there's been so many other cameras from Fuji that always kind of find a home in my bag. So I'm waiting to get another, or my hands on an X100. But for a walk around, travel photography, street photography kind of camera, I would honestly say that that's one of the best decisions you're ever going to make. You have the film simulations, you have a fixed lens on that as well, which is, I believe, it is the 35-2 on that camera, and it's just such a fantastic thing to have. If you have one of those in your bag, man, honestly, I don't think there's no point of having another camera.
You
to be
can't
honest
see
with you.
me. You can't see me right now, but I'm showing it to the audience. I have the Fuji X100V that I just picked up, and it was that
you
was
just
the
picked
reason.
it up, yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the reason. Is
Yeah.
I just wanted this pickup camera where I didn't want to think about it. I don't want to think about what
Yeah.
lens to put on. 35 is my favorite
Absolutely.
focal length. I just wanted to get it
Absolutely.
and go. And man,
Yeah.
I tell you, it
And-
is like you said, something that makes you want to take it with you everywhere.
all the time, everywhere, man. And it is an F2, correct? Gavin, it is an F2 on that
Yeah,
one?
it is an f2. The new
Yeah.
X100V is actually, they improved the lens, so it's actually a bit sharper, can focus a little bit
Well,
closer.
sharp, I heard. Yeah.
And now it's a little bit better
that-
weather sealing. You got to buy the filter adapter, make it fully weather sealed. But man,
Yeah,
what a
yeah.
inspirational camera! I hate using it because it sounds so
Absolutely.
cliche, but it really does make you want to take it everywhere.
Exactly, and like that's what I think the Fuji ecosystem does for you, is that once it's in your hand and you feel, just what it feels like, what the what it looks like, all the retro buttons on it, just the retro styling of it, it makes you want to shoot. For anybody who's listening in, if you were to pick up an X100, like it wouldn't do you any harm. Like it would be a camera that's going to be in your kit for a very long time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really think it's one of those cool cameras where if you do a lot of photography on your phone and you want to take it to the next step, and you're kind of not really just a casual, like you are a hobbyist, you do want to shoot more, shoot often.
Yeah.
It's one of those cameras that will entertain that and really kind of promote
Absolutely.
that. I got to ask you though,
Absolutely.
having these two sort of families, the Sony family, the Fuji family, they obviously have their strengths and weaknesses. What do you like about the Sonys that they offer, and what do you like about the Fujis?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I honestly, I feel like I have like a real hearted connection with the Fuji system. But going over to the Sony system, it's been a lot of fun, like learning a brand new system. And there are some things on the Sony cameras that just blow me away. Their autofocusing is so, like, I don't even know how they do it. It is the
scary.
fastest autofocusing in the world, I believe, and it is scary. The eye autofocus and what they've done with it is just phenomenal. Like it's instant. It's almost instant. Whereas, I wish the Sony system would have some of the film simulations on it, or the articulating screens like the Fuji X-T3 has, which is just really unique. I don't really think there's another one in the industry that can do what the X-T3 can do as far as the screen goes. But I wish the Fuji had that sort of autofocusing system. I wish the Sony user menu is just horrible. Like, I mean, I'm gonna just be honest about it. And trying to find something in a Sony menu is just good luck. You gotta be familiar with that menu a few times. And when we're doing portrait photography, a lot of the things that I notice is that with the Fuji, when I take a picture, it's like what I see is what I get. The colors, that's what Fuji is really known for, is their color science. And the colors coming out of that portrait session are just perfect. They're bang on perfect. Whereas I feel like the Sony has this green and magenta tint going on sometimes, and you got to do a little bit more like post processing with it. So both systems, honestly, they're 10 out of 10 systems. And like, we can never, just like a car, we can never want one car that has everything in it. There's a bunch of this that we want from another car and another car. And that's just really how I look at these two systems, that they're great. If I do have to pick my go-to when I'm traveling or whatever, it's going to be my Fuji. And I think now recently, if I'm doing my studio stuff or my wedding stuff, it is going to be the Sony, just because of that faster autofocusing.
Nice, nice, man. I mean, I love hearing
Yeah.
how creators choose the gear and why they favor one over the other, and really talk about these
Hmm.
concrete reasons. Because what's interesting is it's always one or two key things. It's never a whole suite of features. It's one or two things that are particular to what they do and how they create. I want to
Hmm.
pivot a little bit because you don't just do portraits, you don't just do weddings, you also do a lot of street and travel photography. And we had a great conversation about this previously because you
Yeah.
went to India as well earlier this year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell me,
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
me about the trip and sort of the ethos of it and what you were trying to do there.
Yeah. I mean, so originally that trip started off with a wedding photographer. Like, I was doing some massive wedding in Gujarat, India, and once the wedding sort of, fizzled out, I just extended my trip and I just kind of went away and started doing things on my own.
Right.
And I got lost, and that's kind of usually how I take like travel photography. Anyways, I get lost on purpose, and I try to find my way back home to the hotel or the Airbnb or whatever. I get lost on purpose. I try to talk to as many locals as I possibly can.
Yeah.
This time around, I tried to talk to as many locals as I possibly could to get me to come in for a cup of tea, and that was a bonus for me. But it was just overall the textures, the smells, the colors. India is one of those places where you can go there 30 to 40 times, and
Yeah.
every time you come back, it's going to be like you've been here for the first time. And um, I gave myself some challenges throughout India, because to try to tell, to say that you're going to go and photograph India, it's not going to happen. Like you actually need to go and take multiple trips. So I gave
Yeah.
myself a few challenges. Like today, I'm only going to shoot the color yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Or, today I'm only going to shoot blue. Today I'm only going to shoot triangles and work on triangular composition or circular composition and really find textures or symmetry to work with. And India's architect is on a whole different level. So like, it's like the first time I went to India to go and photograph India, I actually came back pretty disheartened and very discouraged. And I was like, there's no way. Like, how are you supposed to photograph this fort or these colossal monuments? It's just, but then you don't need to necessarily do that. You can pick a small part of like a building or an architectural place and focus on the smaller elements that make the bigger picture. So
Yeah.
again, sort of like slowing down and really trying to take in, what it has to offer. It's a great place to be for those who haven't gone there yet. It'll definitely transform they'll just take your photography to a whole nother level, I think. But
Yeah.
you also had a trip to India as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I was there as well, and I just loved hearing you sort of, echo what I experienced there, where it almost forces you to just approach it in a unique way that you can't really approach any other country in the world. I feel like it is
No,
so unique in that
no.
way. And man, as much as I love Acros and shooting black and white and seeing in black and white, it demands you to
Yeah.
kind of pay attention to the color, to the texture
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
really, like you said, let me echo that. I went in with a bit of a shot list where I'm like, I want to
Okay.
capture students. I want to capture, older people. I want to capture colors. I have a list
Yeah.
of these little things that I want to focus on, or markets, or busy, or
Awesome,
isolation.
man.
I would just have
Yeah.
these words sketched out. I'm like, this is what I want to try to capture today. And I think that's a bit of travel advice for people as well. Listen, hey, I know we were going to talk about portrait photography, but we're going to hit a little bit of everything here. But if you are
Absolutely,
traveling,
absolutely.
is to kind of travel with a little bit of intention, that you kind of go with this idea and a scope and a plan and a strategy of how you want to approach it, as opposed to trying to just, like you talked about before, spray and pray, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something that I do is like I kind of like I just like how I take my wedding photography and I slow down with that. Kind of scope out the scene a little bit. I do that with my travel photography as well. Like, I mean, as excited as we all are to reach into the bag, hit the streets, and go, make some great photographs. The first day where I kind of settle into a new area, I don't really do that. I kind of just walk around and I go see what the locals are up to, and where I can, get a nice cup of coffee and see the corner cafes and that kind of stuff. And I try to familiarize myself with the area a little bit. And then once I feel a little bit more comfortable, then I'll go and reach for a camera. I usually start with the 35 on my camera, and I'll kind of go from there. And at that point, I start off with like a general perspective, and then break it down into something like doing local portraits and stuff. And that's actually something that I did recently, where I actually set up a full-on studio, like a location studio, right in the middle of the street with like strobes and everything. And I just had a lineup of people come up and take portraits with me in the middle of the street, and it was the coolest experience I've ever had in my life, man.
Yeah.
And I wasn't charging anybody for it or anything like that. And people came up, they, with their kids or their family or whatever, they took a bunch of pictures, and we
Wow.
just emailed them pictures at the end of the day. It was such a wicked experience to do something like that, where at this point I got to see the bigger picture. I got to hear some local stories. I got to interact with, kids and all that kind of stuff. It was just such a great experience, and I can't wait to go back and do that again, and
Yeah.
but same thing, instead of spraying and praying, really slow it down, because that's what I did the first time I went to India a couple of years ago for my photography, portfolio. I just sprayed and prayed and hoped that I could get some epic looking shots. And it didn't really work out in my favor. And this time when I came around, I actually had so many more usable photographs that I was like, I want to print these. I want to put these out on a gallery or something like that. And
Yeah.
just, it really helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
feel
really like your idea of going in with an intention. That's really cool. I'm going to keep that in mind for next time. And, that, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool.
And you kind of echo on it too, where as opposed to try to go after quantity and try to maximize every single day, every single hour, and try to think about it as like, how many shots can I get today? Is really slow it down and try to go after a masterpiece, a gem. Like, if when you get to a certain point as a photographer where you're like, if I can get one great image in this calendar year that makes the portfolio, and it does get progressively harder, right? After year to kind of get a portfolio. I mean, it is so hard that if you can go on one trip and get one, what an amazing achievement that is. And it's really kind of cultivating all the movements around that and, making it sort of grow and come to you naturally as opposed to kind of pushing itself there or forcing its way there, right? You haven't, I noticed that you're kind of keeping a lot of those images a little bit secret. You showed me a few of them. You're not really posting a lot of those images yet, but you're kind of working on something with those images, right? Well, tell us about the project you're working on.
I am. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just with the nature of the business and stuff like that, with it being a wedding and portrait photography kind of thing, there's a lot of stuff that happens, for both of us behind the scenes. And a project that I'm working on right now is probably going to be a 3 to 5 year project where I'm continually going back to India, and I'm doing a project called Midnight in India, or Midnight in Rajasthan specifically, where I'm shooting, India at night, and I'm trying to bring out those night elements that India has to offer, because India, during the day and India during the night are two very different animals. And like I had an opportunity to do that this time around, where I took the exact same picture, during the day and the exact same picture at night in Rajasthan, and it just looked like two different places. You could see the desert, the stars, and it just looked like two different places altogether. And so that is an ongoing project that I'm working on. I'm hoping to get that published in the next 3 to 5 years as well. But that's just going to be a big learning experience. That's all it is. Just taking it again slow, selecting your pictures, calling the pictures, making sure that this picture tells a story. And like you said, if you can come back with that one picture, that's an achievement on its own. Come back with that one story, that one picture. With this trip, I mean, I came back with maybe, I would say, 100 pictures that I wanted to use and I thought were, good for this project and would suit the topic. But there's one picture out of that 100, that I always connect with. I'm always like, this one picture has a story. And I think I showed that one to you, but it was such a heartfelt story, man. And it's like every time I look at it, and it brings me back to that moment. And I was like, that's what all this is about. Going back and reliving that moment,
Yeah. And you know what? We're running out of time here. And for those of you watching, we do 30 minutes on YouTube, but then we go on Instagram where you guys can get involved. You can watch us do more questions, but you guys can ask questions as well directly with Vinay. Let me end it off on this. What do you want a person to see or feel when they see one of your images? What is it that you're going after for the viewer that you hope that they sort of resonate with?
Yeah. Honestly, like if it was like with my work, I would say like look at the bigger picture, look at the story. I know some of you guys always say things like, it'd be nice to see some of the brighter stuff, and we could do all that. That's great. It's just not my style. It's just not who I am, and everything that I had to do was with it's at night. It's always at night, whether I'm composing music or photography. It's all at night. So I think looking at a picture and trying to understand what the deeper meaning of it is, almost like going into an art gallery, looking at a picture and trying to be like, what is this artist's intent? What did they mean by this? And that's it. Just look at the bigger picture of things. That's all.
Amazing, man. Vinay, again, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love having a conversation with you, and we're going to continue this conversation on Instagram. And you clearly carved out a great, a little piece for yourself, a segment for yourself in this industry, and you bring your unique flair to it, which I absolutely love. Where can people find your work? How can they get in touch with you? Where can they see more of what you're creating?
Absolutely. So we recently started a YouTube channel as well. It's called The Midnight Show, and basically it's a podcast that has anything and everything to do with content creating. So not just photography, guys. Everything from music, photography, even things like interior design, cake design, anything and everything, DJing. Check that out if you haven't. That's called The Midnight Show. You can
Nice.
also find us on online at www.themidnightmedia.com, and of course on Instagram at The Midnight Media.
Awesome, dude. Again, make sure you guys follow him, support the work, and check out all the amazing stuff that he's doing. Vinay, thank you so much. We're going to go
Thank
over to
you, brother.
Instagram
Thank
and
you.
we're going to continue the conversation there.
Awesome, man. Sounds great, man.
Take care.
All right, man. Thank you.